when Buddhism arose in the 5th century BC in India, it, along with Jainism, shared most of the characteristics of the dominant Brahmin religion. So the characteristics in the case of Buddhism that was shared was samsara, so the belief that we're reincarnating from, or reborn rather, from one life to the next over a very, very long period of time. Karma, which is our actions, which determine the quality of our rebirths, and liberation, becoming free of those rebirths. So for both Brahmanism and Jainism, what was within those various rebirths was the soul, or an underlying transcendent self, which is somehow encased within this coating of what we normally assume to be the person, so body, mind, consciousness, and so on. And the point of practice, particularly the mortification practices that the Buddha's companions indulged in, is to basically free the immortal soul from that casing and liberate it. Buddhism diverges from Brahmanism and Jainism and the general cultural atmosphere of India of that time by denying the soul and by denying that there is an unchanging self behind our experience. But on the face of it, Buddhism retains those other aspects of karma, samsara, and eventual liberation. And one of the results of that retention is that it's been a persistently vexing issue for Buddhists, how we have consequences. So if there's no self, then if I do bad things, where do the consequences of that adhere? And a lot of Buddhist intellectual effort, around about the time of Nagarjuna in particular, is trying to provide answers to that. However, I think that at a fundamental level, it's the wrong question. The reason is that we imagine that that our self and other entities persist through time. So we take it for granted that there's these discrete, autonomous entities called self and things, which, as it were, unravel their will and their narrative and their destiny through time. But I think it's actually the other way around, that other than as an obvious, convenient, probably inescapable way of us making sense of our world, our idea of linear time, past, present, and future, comes about precisely to accommodate this presumption of the self or the soul. And so, by logical implication, when the self is no longer affirmed, then time, as commonly understood, is no longer affirmed either. So we often think of being and time as kind of two planes. So we think of maybe a horizontal plane, which is being, and a vertical plane, which is time. And if we wanted to make this more figurative, then we could imagine being as being the ground, and time as being this gradually upward developing tower, constantly growing up towards the future. And we might also imagine ourselves as being a person running up the staircase of that tower, both to avoid the imaginary annihilation of the past, but also to elevate ourselves. It seems to me that this tower is inherently unstable because it is predominantly made of the self. And so if the self collapses, the tower collapses back into the ground of being. Now that, on the face of it, leaves us with the issue, how do we understand change? Well, if we continue with the analogy of the ground, then the answer is obvious. So the ground, extending in all directions, is instantaneous. The ground does not appear just before I step on it. It's always there. However, I'm always going to be located in a particular part or parts of that ground. But from the perspective of the ground, everything is instantaneous. And from the perspective of the ground is walking through me.